Good morning, sports fans. Welcome to the show where knowledge is truth and the numbers do not lie. This is Cinder Sports. Remember that the views and opinions expressed on this show are those of its host, their guests, and callers. They do not necessarily reflect those of this station, its management, other hosts, or advertisers. The shows on the SKO radio network can promote any lifestyle, belief, religion, political affiliation, or other personal practice. These shows are intended for entertainment purposes only, and not to treat, diagnose, or claim to cure any disease or condition. And now, here is your Saturday sports wake-up call. Your host, John O'Donnell.
Good morning, SKO Network. This is John O'Donnell, and this is Cinder Sports. We are live from the Deb McCune Broadcast Center here in Akron, Ohio. I am joined by Shotgun Riding, producing the show, Aaron, the voice, K-Back.
Riding Chewy.
Yeah, and we have Joe running around here somewhere. Joe! He is gathering our betting slips because this is Show Me the Money weekend here on Cinder Sports. We need the money! So, before we get into that,
I'm no Cuba Gooding Jr.
You look just like him though.
I do.
You can call or text the show, and we hope you will. You will be able to call at the bottom of this hour. You can text the show all show long at 234-200-5110. You can tweet the show at Cinder Sports. Tweet me at HitTrain1. Please also follow the show. Give us a like on Facebook, Cinderblock Sports, and you can email me, cinderblocksports@gmail.com. I am everywhere. We got asked at the end of the show last week where you can find replays of this show. I'm glad someone asked that. It will be on iTunes. It is also on YouTube. So please go to the webpage, go to the Facebook page, our Twitter. You can find our replays if you want. One thing that I will tell you is we also have some in-depth interviews that don't always make the show that can be found on iTunes on the podcast. So please check that out. And we thank everybody. Give us a like, give us a follow, and thanks again for listening. As I mentioned, this is Show Me the Money weekend. We're focusing on sports gambling this week. So to that end, today's text and Twitter question is, what is your best or worst bet you've ever made on sports? For me, and I've made a lot of them, I had a terrible beat a few years ago in the NCAA tournament. My co-host on Bad Friend Choices, Rick Carpenter, who will be joining the show later today, and I had the over in a game, which means we needed the total to reach a certain number for us to win money, or jelly beans, as the case may be. And it was flying over the total. It looked like we were going to be perfectly fine. We were going to indulge in tasty beverages and have some jelly beans in our pockets. And then both teams developed clankitis. They missed every shot humanly possible, and we ended up giving away jelly beans instead of enjoying those tasty jelly beans for ourselves. So please share your story with us. Again, 234-200-5110 is the text line, or tweet us at Cinder Sports.
I got a story for you.
I would love to hear it.
The first time I did a competitive bracket, like actually submitted one for, I've been doing brackets for, at office parties and things like that. Didn't mean anything, just like bragging rights. But the first time I did a competitive one, I submitted it to the local city newspaper, not the dealer, but the little local paper, and I won. I won golf passes, and I don't golf. I won restaurant passes, which is a really hoity-toity restaurant, but like I ate good steak for like a month, and I'd be like gift certificates galore. But it floored me that I won, and the reason that I won was that was the year that Michigan went up against Louisville in the final, and no one had either team in the final, and that's what pushed me over the top.
There you go. See, one of the best. Mine was a bad beat. We had a good cover here from Aaron Quebec, and again, we want to hear yours. Text or tweet the show. So gambling is a big part of sports, and it was about a year ago where the United States Supreme Court, they invalidated a law called PAPSA, the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act. They ruled that it was unconstitutional. And what PAPSA did was it said the federal government can prohibit sports gambling in certain states and not others. Well, the U.S. Supreme Court said that's illegal. You can't just have Vegas have sports gambling and all the other states cannot. That just doesn't make sense from a constitutional perspective. And as a constitutional law guy, I find the case very interesting. I just don't have 8 hours to get into it. Now, that case itself did not make sports gambling legal in other states. States still have to adopt gambling laws, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But it did open the door. It allowed states to make the decision. And now, almost a dozen states have sports wagering. And 10 other states, including Ohio, are considering how to legalize sports in their state. The reason we're doing this show today is these legislatures, when they pass these bills, there's a window. The legislature closes usually in the beginning of the summer. So in Ohio, it's June 30th. So if something does not happen by June 30th, we're going to have to wait a whole another year, absent an act of God or the governor, to get sports gambling in Ohio. So we want to cover the issue. And to do that, we're going to have Rich Exner, who is actually a data analytical editor for Cleveland.com. He also works for the Cleveland Plain Dealer. He's been following this very closely. He's going to let us in on the scoop of what's going on in Ohio and what it could mean financially. And he's got some really interesting stories from a sports perspective regarding data analytics. We're also going to have Derek Stevens. Derek Stevens is changing the face of Las Vegas. I am a degenerate gambler who goes to Las Vegas numbers of times a year. And Derek Stevens is building a new casino in downtown Vegas. This is the first one in downtown Vegas, also known as Old Las Vegas, in almost 40 years. It is going to feature the largest sports book in Las Vegas. Right now it's the Superbook, the Westgate. That one is a football field long. It is absolutely massive. Now this one will not be that big. It's going to be about 80 yards wide. What it will be is 3 stories tall. It is going to be absolutely massive. Derek has also opened the first new sportsbook company, meaning a company that makes lines and takes bets in nearly a decade. And again, he's going up against Caesars. He's going up against William Hill. It's amazing the challenges he's taking on in Vegas, and he's really redefining Las Vegas.
We have a story that was tweeted in by Tony. He says that he won nearly $1,000 on a 5-6-7 trifecta when American Pharoah won the Triple Crown at Belmont.
That is a great story. And horse racing, I think, lends itself to those stories, right? One that I will share is I meant to bet the 1, 2, and 11 horse in Justify's Derby run. I accidentally bet the 1, 5, which was Justify. I didn't want Justify in my trifecta. I got him, and damn good thing because he won. So, and I think it was only like $80, but again, I can't read, and as you know, it's my understanding there is no math on this show. So apparently I got lucky there.
It was my understanding that there would be no math.
And I need that because I can't do math. So we have Derek, we have Rich. Who else are we going to have? Well, my co-host for Bad Friend Choices, Rick Carpenter, also going to join the show. We're going to talk about the NBA. We're going to talk about the Browns getting the draft, which is huge for Cleveland. Huge. And we're going to cover that more, but stay tuned. And, one thing I want to talk to Rick about, Rick owns the Windsor Pub. I want to get his thoughts on the practical impact of Ohio legalized sports gambling. So he'll be on the show. We're also going to talk about the NBA playoffs. That's probably the biggest actual sports story we have going on right now. We also want to talk about the PGA Championships, the Preakness, both of which did not get the same buzz that we see when storylines are involved. And I will say that with a caveat that Brooks Koepka is about as great as we've seen in a while, and nobody seems to give a damn. 2 topics we'll get into if we have time, and I hope we do. I want to talk about the risk of game fixing in the aftermath of legalized sports gambling. And I want to talk about how storylines are so important to events like the Preakness, to events like the PGA Championship, and other things to draw in casual sports fans. Again, next segment around 9:25 a.m., we're going to open the phone lines. Please give us a call. We'll also open the phone lines later on in the show. But again, text us all show long, 234-200-5110. All right, let's start with some headlines. The PGA Championship, being a Saturday show, the PGA Championship concluded last Sunday, so it's been almost a week. But I do think it's very interesting from a few perspectives. 1, Tiger Woods. He wins the Masters, and everybody says Tiger's back. Tiger's the man. Tiger is the man. Tiger's also 40-some years old at this point. And he did not play a tournament since the Masters. He also did not practice on Wednesday before the PGA Championship. He then played like crap for 2 days, and he went back to his very short but beautiful girlfriend. So what does that mean? Well, it means one thing. Tiger is human. He's 40-some years old. He's got surgeries. I think he's had about 329 surgeries, and he's just not what he once was, which was the greatest single golfer ever. Now he is lightning in a bottle, right? He's going to get hot in a place like the Masters in Augusta where he's played it 95 different times. He's going to win a tournament here and there. But Bethpage Black is a long course with rough like you've never seen. And he just had nothing for that course. He's never going to be consistently great anymore. There's too many young lines. We're going to talk about Brooks Koepka, but you've got Justin Thomas, you've got Jordan Spieth. I think Rory McIlroy still plays golf at sometimes. You've got Tony Finau. He's just never going to be the dominant golfer that Tiger once was. And I know we wanted that storyline to be there, but we were really fooling ourselves if we thought Tiger Woods with no practice and on a gimpy body was going to be able to compete here. He wasn't, and he went home real early. Brooks Koepka's the story here. Wire-to-wire winner. He's the most dominant golfer in sports, and nobody could pick him out of a lineup if they needed to save their lives. I know I couldn't. The guy hates the media. He was in New York for the PGA Championship. The PGA asked him, hey, can you do a media tour for us? He said, no, I'm going back to Texas to smoke brisket. Which, hey, great choice. But you need a face of the PGA, and Brooks Koepka will not be it. The real storyline here was he was winning by like 95 strokes going into Sunday and almost choked it away. He almost choked it away. Dustin Johnson was on his heels. Brooks held on. He had a 7-stroke lead going into Sunday, won by 2. And afterwards, Brooks was the man when he talked about how easy winning majors is. And you don't hear this kind of honesty, but if you think about it, he's not wrong. First, he said, look, you look at the field of golfers, 50% of them just can't win. Okay, fair enough. They're going to compete, but they can't win majors. Fair enough. Then he said 50% of them aren't at my level. Okay, so now we're down to 25% of the tour. That leaves about 15 to 25 golfers. And he said, I can feel like I can beat them on any given weekend. Again, he's not saying anything wrong, but he's kind of slapping those 15 or 20 golfers and the rest of the PGA Tour right in their mouth. M-O-U-F, for those of you who are spelling with me. And when they asked him, can you win double-digit majors? His response was, it seems reasonable and it may be easy. Hats off to you, Brooks Koepka, for having those onions to say things like that. And I do think Brooks Koepka's attitude comes from where he came from. He was overseas, not playing in the overseas PGA Tour. He was overseas playing challenger events, right? He was basically playing the Panera Bread Open in Budapest, Hungary, right? I mean, and that was a big event for him. He won like 7 shillings. And then he comes over and he is dominating. He won the U.S. Open 2 years ago. He won it last year. He won a PGA last year. He won a PGA this year. He has more majors than he does regular tour wins. And I think he's on his way to being something really special. And so does Vegas. Tying into the theme there. The host does something good here on Cinder Block Sports. The Westgate came out with a prop bet. Now, Westgate is the biggest sports book in Vegas, second to William Hill. And their bet is this: over-under number of majors by 2040. So that is about 18 years, 22 years. I don't know. My understanding there'd be no math. The number is 7.5. The Westgate is guessing that he will have 7.5 majors in the next 20 plus years. That number seems incredibly low. I will be in Vegas in a few months. You will see a John O'Donnell shaped blur heading to a betting window if that line is anywhere close to what it stands now. And we're going to know more about it. I think this might be a sucker bet. I think Westgate might be fishing here because we've got the PGA Championship, but we still have 2 more majors. So we'll see how serious this bet is at the end of the year after they've played the British Open, after they've played the U.S. Open. But if that number, 7.5 majors, holds up, I'll bet that all day long because I think he's going to win at least 10. So that's golf. And for those of you who are still awake, we're going to move to the NBA. The Warriors, surprise, 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 have made it to the NBA Finals. They swept Portland 4-0.
No.
I know. I'm
Really?
shocked. Shocked face.
Wow.
Right.
The Warriors. The Golden State Warriors.
Golden State Warriors, right? And I'll tell you an interesting story on this. It's not true anymore, but when they first won the Western Conference Finals, the odds for them to win the finals were actually more expensive. You would have had to pay more money than at the beginning of the year. That's how sure Vegas was at the beginning of this year that they were going to win. It was cheaper to get them at the beginning of the year
than it is now.
Than it would have been. Now that line has moved all of a sudden because Vegas started watching the Eastern Conference Finals and realized it's me, you, and Rick Carpenter against the Warriors, and it's probably not a good thing for the Eastern Conference. But one thing about the Golden State Warriors, which might be a little dangerous, Portland had 3 15-point leads in this series. 3 different games, and they didn't win one of them. And this is without Kevin Durant, without Boogie Cousins, and without Iguodala for Game 4. If you started a team with those 3 players, you could make the playoffs. You might even win a round or 2 was starting a team with Durant, Cousins, and Iguodala. And those guys aren't even playing. Portland threw everything they could at him. I think a guy named Myers Leonard had 30 points. Myers and Leonard, I don't even know who that guy is. Neither did anybody except Mr. and Mrs. Leonard. He scored 30 points. It didn't matter. Golden State goes to their 5th straight final. Never been done since the 1960s. I know, everybody sit down. Michael Jordan would have done it. Michael Jordan would have done it. Look, Michael Jordan had to serve his gambling, had to try minor league baseball for 2 years. And because he did, the Bulls did not go to 5 straight finals. It didn't happen. You can tell me it might have, but it didn't. This Golden State team is one of the best we've ever seen. And I know I personally sell them short because they've done it with a collection of superstars. But think about that. The Bulls didn't exactly have me playing center for them. They had superstars too. They had Tony Kukoc, who was the best European player, Scottie Pippen, top 50 player, Michael Jordan, not bad at the game of basketball, and a bunch of really good role players. That was a really good team of stars too. But the Golden State Warriors, 5th straight finals. Again, LeBron went to 8, but it was with 2 different teams. So, Golden State Warriors, hats off to them. The Raptors and Bucks. The Eastern Conference final is absolutely awesome. And I was finally proven right after I said I was wrong. I had been saying all playoff series long, the Bucks are going to have growing pains. They're a young team. That's what happens. And then they smashed the Raptors in games 1 and 2. Last week I sat here and told you I was wrong. The Bucks do not need to grow up. They're ready to go. They're ready right now. And now they've lost 3 in a row for the first time all year. So I was right after I admitted I was wrong.
There is one thing that I think you said it last week, where this is a home team series. And so far that has proven the point. The home team has won this series.
Until game 5. Last game 5 was actually in Milwaukee. Toronto got that win, broke serve, and
right.
Now they can finish it off tonight.
There you go.
And look, I was right about the Bucks because it happens to everyone. It happened to Michael Jordan. He couldn't get past the Celtics. He couldn't get past the Pistons. He finally did and became the champion that he became. LeBron couldn't get past the Pistons. And the Spurs smashed him when he did get to the finals the first time. And I'm sure Rick Carpenter will point out to me why else LeBron has failed. The point is, those growing pains happened. It looked like Giannis Antetokounmpo was immune to that. Turns out he wasn't. We're going to talk more about that series, but I want to talk to Rick about this later. I think Kawhi Leonard is becoming the closest thing to Michael Jordan we've seen in a long time. Mind you, he's battling a leg injury. There was a specific moment in that game 5 where he went off for a shot on the wrong foot because his leg was bothering him. He's dominating on offense. He's dominating on defense. He is an absolute killer, and he can score from everywhere. And that's why he is dominating this series, and Giannis is not. Giannis Antetokounmpo looks like an elk lost in the woods at times. He's running down the court, spinning like a whirling dervish, and throwing the ball out of bounds to absolutely nobody. Giannis has one move. It's the most dominant move in basketball, and that is plow everybody over and dunk the basketball. But Toronto is throwing a lot of bodies at him. He's struggling with that, and because of that, it looks like the Raptors are going to get the privilege of getting boat raced by the Warriors here coming up. We have a lot more to cover. We're going to cover the Preakness. We're going to cover sports gambling, and we're going to have your calls in the next segment. You're listening to Cinder Block Sports. I'm your host, John O'Donnell, and we will be right back.
And now, here is your host, John O'Donnell.
And welcome back to Cinder Block Sports. I'm your host, John O'Donnell, here with Aaron, the voice K-Back, and intern Joe, who is out looking for Giannis Antetokounmpo's jump shot. He'll be back later.
Is he going to be back at all?
We don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
If he's looking for Giannis's jump shot?
Could take a while.
Yeah, he'd have better luck finding Nemo.
Poor Nemo. Or Dory. Disney, we're here to promote your products. Pay us. So, one thing about my last comment about Michael Jordan and Kawhi Leonard. Everybody, calm down. I am not saying that Kawhi Leonard is Michael Jordan, but think about this. He's taking everybody, including mine, poster child for the next great superstar, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and making him look somewhat human. And if he overcomes the Bucks, and Kawhi Leonard is the superstar on that team. There's some good players on that team. He's the man. If he overcomes the Bucks, that's one thing. He's still going to have to do what I think is the unthinkable, and that is overcome the Warriors. And we talked about last week, if Antetokounmpo were to lead the Bucks over the Warriors, there'd be this discussion about him approaching LeBron status, greatness status, because of what he's working with. The same applies to Kawhi. If somehow he's able to dominate that series and overtake the Warriors, you have to start to consider him as one of the all-time greats. I do think he resembles Jordan physically. I think his game resembles Michael's as well. He's obviously not the same level of player as Michael Jordan, but he's as close as we've probably seen since Kobe Bryant. And I love his killer attitude, and I think he's got greatness written all over him. So we were talking on the break, and Aaron made a great point. The NBA playoffs are not the only thing going on. The NHL Stanley Cup is going on, and this kind of dovetails into what I want to talk about later. There's no real storyline to draw in the casual fan. And I think hockey fans are the most passionate around. Diehard hockey fans are among the best fans you'll ever find. So the Boston Bruins in the Stanley Cup again, playing the St. Louis Blues, who are in the Stanley Cup for the first time in like 300 years. Aaron, there's no way that St. Louis wins this series, right?
No. I can see them winning maybe a game if they're lucky too, like a 3 overtime groaner.
Right.
But at worst case scenario, Boston takes this in 6. But I can see them sweeping.
Yeah, and I can too. And I don't follow hockey nearly as much as I do other sports. I grew up in a hockey area. I know enough about it to be dangerous, but Boston's just a much better team here.
Absolutely.
So we are, again, taking your text at 234-200-5110. We're going to open the phone lines up here at the bottom of this segment. I do want to start, though, with talking about sports gambling, and I want to get Rich Exner on here before we open up the lines. One thing about sports gambling, and this is Show Me the Money weekend, we're going to get into legalized sports betting as it kind of spreads through the country and what it means. And the reason that sports gambling, I think, is so natural, we'll say, is men at some point in their lives struggle with feeding our need for competition. Okay? Everyone's different, but a traditional male trait is that drive to be better than other guys, even your buddies, right? Like, if your buddy is a good Golden Tee player, you want to be better. If your buddy can chug a beer in 5 seconds, you want to chug it in 4. It's just the way we are. We want to be better than other guys. It's not just men, right? Women have this drive too. It's not as culturally accepted and cultivated as it is with us. When we're little boys, it's who can win the race, who can run faster, who can be stronger. That's just how we are. And at its core, right, sports wagering is a way for men to have some competitive interest in an otherwise meaningless game. For example, I have bet on a Canadian Football League game.
Why?
Because
you just explained it. I'm sorry.
Because Johnny Manziel was playing on the other team, and I knew he was going to throw 33 interceptions, and I covered. Aaron is speechless. He's called The Voice. The Voice is not speechless.
No, that makes perfect sense. I have nothing to combat that. There's absolutely that's a valid reason to bet on Canadian football.
And when Johnny Manziel plays again for Panera Bread University, I'm betting against them too.
There you go.
Give you an idea of the popularity of sports gambling. Recent survey, 20% of all adults, 35% of men 21 to 35 years old say they gamble regularly on the NFL. The rest of the sports are right around 10%. The NFL is king. It might seem like a small amount of fans, but 35% is a big pool. And keep in mind that until last year, it was illegal, except in Vegas, to gamble on sports. And I think those numbers would be bigger. People are not going to admit to illegal activity, even if it's an anonymous survey. People just don't admit to it. So, but at a minimum, we're talking 20% of all adults wager on sports. And now, sports wagering is going to be more accessible than ever. Okay? PAPSA, again, was a federal law that said sports gambling is illegal in all states except Las Vegas. The U.S. Constitution prohibits that kind of law. You cannot have a law from the federal government that favors one state at the expense of all others. The U.S. Supreme Court knocked that law down, and now states are legalizing gambling one state at a time. And it's happening slower than I expected. I expected PAPSA to go down and all these states to have legislation pending. Some did. New Jersey, I think they were up and running in 2 months. Pennsylvania got on board quick. Indiana's on board. West Virginia's on board. And that matters to Ohio because there are neighboring states. So now Ohio residents, if they want to wager on sports, and you're in a border city, go across to Pennsylvania, go across to West Virginia, and who's losing revenue? The state of Ohio. The state of Ohio can't afford to lose revenue. As a result, Ohio, while we are very slow to adopt gambling here, we are on our way to legalize sports gambling. And why is Ohio slow? Well, Ohio is one of those weird states that has a constitutional amendment related to gambling. It has to do with the lottery. And what the Constitution says in Ohio is the Lottery Commission is in charge of all games of chance. That's why you'll notice that even in the racinos, there's no games of skill because you can't have blackjack, you can't have poker because the player can have no impact on the result. And that is a very big deal when you're trying to write legislation about sports gambling. Is sports gambling a game of skill or chance? I think you could argue either way, right? I think as a game of skill, you're looking at a lines, you're looking for advantages. Johnny Manziel's playing on the other side. You know that he sucks. There's some skill involved in that decision. Or it's a coin flip. You're just betting on team A or team B. You have no impact on the result. Therefore, it's a game of chance. You could argue it both ways. Part of that discussion is what I talked about with Rich Exner. We're going to play our interview with him, and we'll come back, open up the phone lines, and get some reaction. And we are joined now by Rich Exner. Rich is a data analysis editor for Cleveland.com, and he's a great follower on Twitter at Rich Exner. That's EXNER. Rich has been following the Ohio legislature's proposals for legalized gambling in Ohio, and he joins the show to offer his thoughts on where we are, where we're heading, and what sports gambling may mean to the state of Ohio. Rich, thank you for joining the show. How are you today?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Hey, Rich, just to start out, can you just give us a 10,000-foot view on where we are on the proposals by the Ohio legislature and maybe one or two key differences in the bills?
Where we're at is there's proposals there. I think most people watching it know something's going to happen. Sports gambling will become legal in Ohio. The question is how long it will take to do it and what form it will take in terms of who will be charged in regulation, where you'll be able to do sports gambling. Just a quick refresher, this goes back, it was a year ago when the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in the case out of New Jersey that basically opened up the possibility of sports gambling in every state in the country. Since then, I think we're up to 8 states that have done it. A couple states were ready to go with that Supreme Court ruling, and they're really close by to us here in Pennsylvania and West Virginia. It's happening now. Ohio, just like kind of was the case with casino gambling, a little slow to get there, but I would expect it to be just like with casino gambling and other forms. Eventually, it'll get here. The governor said he expects it sometime in the next couple of years. He's not out there in front advocating it, but he expects it. So what we have now, we have two bills pending in the legislature. One would have the regulation done through the Ohio Lottery Commission, and one which basically regulates the lotteries and the racinos in Ohio where you can play slot machines. And the other one would be regulated through the Ohio Casino Control Commission, which regulates Ohio's 4 casinos. Bottom line for the bettors, though, both of them at the end of the day would be geared to allowing people to bet both in the casinos and the racinos, as well as with their mobile devices, as long as they're somewhere in Ohio.
Got you. And so the major difference is who's going to control it. And that sounds maybe like a small thing, but could you give me some of your, and maybe not yours, but what people are saying, are the pros and the cons of first, let's start with the Casino Control Commission. What are the proponents of that bill saying are the benefits for that commission having control?
Well, the Casino Control Commission was created with the origination of casinos in Ohio. So the people who believe that that's the right place to regulate it and make the statement that they're used to regulating this industry. Because these are the big casino operators are going to be the ones most likely to be out in the lead on this type of stuff, and that they know how to regulate the industry. That's what they're set up to do, and that the lottery was set up to sell lottery tickets, and selling lottery tickets is a lot different than trying to determine betting lines and making sure that nobody's maybe skewing the games, or doing something, maybe they shouldn't be doing, about that. It's a whole different thing. The advocates to do it through the lottery claim that's the most logical way to do it, and that the lottery's been around the experience. What's kind of interesting, if you go down the lottery path, is it will be a jump into something totally different for the lottery, which, we usually think of the lottery as selling Powerball tickets or maybe scratch-offs. They were set up to regulate games of chance in Ohio, and it's always been games of chance, whether it's a lottery ticket, and even the slot machines that are at the racinos that are under lottery control. Those slot machines don't give the player an ability to make a change. Like, there are no poker slot machines at a racino in Ohio. There are no blackjack slot machines where players have to make choices. So if they do make this leap to go to lottery, it will be a little bit different, as they would be heading into regulating games of skill, kind of like horse racing or something like that.
Well, and you make a very good distinction, and I don't want to put you outside your expertise, but the game of chance, game of skill question may lead us to an Ohio constitutional challenge, correct? There may be an issue with Ohio's constitution depending on how we label sports betting, correct?
I spoke recently to a Dean Emeritus at the Cleveland Martial Law School, Cleveland State, and he literally wrote the book called Ohio Constitution, really evaluating it and so forth. So it was a good person to go to on this. He hadn't yet investigated, but after I called, he got curious himself and did some investigation. He believes that you don't need to change the Constitution to legalize sports gambling in Ohio. That the Constitution essentially basically limits lotteries to being run by lottery, but doesn't stop others. And in fact, he points out there's not a word in the Ohio's Constitution that set up horse racing wagering in Ohio. That's all done legislatively. Where you get into this gets into deep legal discussions, but and maybe your background, you'd be better at this than me, is what do you call a lottery? It does limit lotteries to the lotteries run by the state, and they're described as games of chance. So that's where you get into this kind of deeper argument of, is betting on sports a game of chance or skill? It seems to me, as a non-lawyer, it's a lot more like betting on a horse that's going to win, which would be a game of skill, the winners would argue, than a game of chance where you go in and scratch off a lottery ticket.
Well, as a frequent gambler, I can tell you that I must not have a lot of skill if it isn't that indeed a skill endeavor. I want to move away from the legal argument because really I think at the end of the day, what matters most to my listeners and the people who want to bet on sports is, does either bill change the way in which, in other words, where people can place their bets? So, for example, there's lottery machines in every bar, a lot of restaurants. I mean, are people going to be able to bet from those bars and taverns, or is it still going to be restricted to just a few locations?
What's common about the two bills, and this is changing a little bit, so if somebody's listening to this a week from now, it could be a little bit different. What's common about the two bills is that there would be an opportunity for the racinos, casinos to do wagering there. And there would be an opportunity for people like the operators of the casinos and racinos to set it up so you could do it from your phone through mobile devices. And with all this modern technology, they actually can figure out whether you're in the state of Ohio or pretty darn close.
Sure.
And if you're not, you'd have to be somewhere in Ohio. You couldn't go place your bet on Ohio State to the Jack Casino Cleveland if you're sitting in Florida. Where it gets a little bit different is under the plan for the lottery, they'd also extend this possibility that if the lottery chose to license, you could have it like at your fraternal halls, like the American Legions, that type of things. Right. If they're also selling alcohol. Neither one's my understanding at this point, again, subject to change, would open it up even if it was a lottery, so you could go to any place you bought a lottery ticket and be able to place your bet. That does not seem to be the case in either at this point.
That was my read as well. I just wasn't, you're a little closer, so thank you for that input. Okay, you're a numbers guy. Let me ask you some questions on numbers. Do you feel, I don't want to get your feelings involved. Does either bill speak to the amount of revenue that may be generated? Is there a difference? Is there a difference that's seen or observed in the amount of revenue that may be generated under either bill?
No, and it's probably going to be a small pot in the big pie. Ohio's budget is, I think over 2 years, it's like $70 billion with a B, somewhere in that neighborhood. I could be off. I don't have it right in front of me. We're talking about $30, $40 million maybe when this gets up and running. It's not a lot of money. That's what's got people fooled a little bit on this, is that you hear a lot about how much money is wagered on sports. Right. But remember, what only gets taxed is is the amount of money that, we'll call it the bookie in this case, gets to keep. And the tax rates are small on that, generally speaking. And in Pennsylvania, they're high. I think they're north of 30%. In West Virginia, I think it's 10%, I'm not mistaken. In Las Vegas, it's 6.4% or thereabouts. In Ohio, I think both bills are talking around 10%. So when you're getting down to around 10% and you're only talking about the money they keep, after you pay out winnings, it doesn't add up to a lot. That seems to be the consensus. Even the folks who follow the industry in Las Vegas, it's not huge amounts of money. It is some money though, but what the industry likes about it is that if you end up going somewhere or you're using a mobile device and you're betting sports, you might be doing something else too. If you're actually at a casino, you might be buying some drinks. You might sit down at the craps table or whatever. But in Las Vegas, it's kind of surprising to me when I first started looking into it. It's really a small part of the gambling revenue in Las Vegas, even though it's an important part that draws a lot of attention.
Well, and that's an interesting point you make. I read an article you wrote, or maybe you didn't write the article, but I remember I saw this in an article you were talking about New Jersey. The number of revenue is huge, but it sounds like, there was a lot of money bet on sports, but not necessarily resulting in a lot of tax dollars for that state. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Whereas opposed to like casinos in Ohio and the lottery at the casinos, they keep about a third of the money after what the casino keeps after paying out winnings. About a third of that's taxed. That does amount to I want to say we're around $250 million a year, say at the Cleveland Casino. So that's about $80 million in tax dollars there. But that tax rate's at 30%. And if you're sitting in a blackjack game, you can go through your money. You can make lots and lots of bets in a hurry. Where suppose a sporting event, you're waiting on the results, even if you did bet 10 games on a given day.
No, absolutely. And we've been joined by Rich Exner of Cleveland.com, data analysis editor. Rich, I'm close to this from a sports perspective, but not from the data and numbers perspective you are. So I'm just curious, a very open-ended question here. As a data guy, as a numbers guy, what is the most interesting part of legalizing sports gambling in Ohio to you?
I think it's just this leap of sports to a different level. I'm in my 50s, so I'm used to hearing the sports leagues say forever that this will corrupt our game and this will do this to the game and that to the game, and it'll take away from it. To me, that ship sailed when the leagues got involved in partnerships and ownership with things like FanDuel, or I forget what one of them they're in more than the other. We got FanDuel, and what's the other one?
DraftKings.
Well, one or both. There's a lot of sports ownership in there, and you go to a ball game now, and they're showing you not the scroll, the out of town scores, but that. So they know it generates interest. So for them to sit back and try to say, no, you're corrupting our sport. You're betting on an individual. I would think that would lend itself more to corruption than the team's result.
Right.
And they bought into that. So it seems kind of silly. So I think, to me, at the end of the game, it'll be more interest in sports. There'll have to be safeguards in place if sports gambling increases to make sure people aren't corrupting the game. But to me, there's going to be a lot more people paying attention to the game. I don't know the numbers on this. I haven't looked into it. Is there going to be more people betting, or how much more than right now? I know a lot of people bet, overseas or through the internet, but I would think that just the idea of doing something on the internet through somebody that you can't walk through their door would some number of people aren't doing it because that's the way it is. So I would think the amount of sports gambling would go up in Ohio if it's by, if you know who you're placing your bets with, you can actually walk in and cash a ticket as opposed to waiting for money to be moved around electronically and having limits on when you can do your draws out of it and so forth.
Well, I'm sure wives everywhere are excited that people will be more interested in sports. I'm sure they're very excited by that possibility. We've been joined by Rich Exner of the Cleveland.com. Just two more quick questions before I let you go. On the bills themselves, because I found this interesting. New Jersey's bill, that was the first one. Like you said, it was a New Jersey case. It was ready to go after PAPSA was eliminated. And New Jersey's bill prohibits gambling on college events in New Jersey and on all New Jersey schools, no matter where the events are placed. Is Ohio considering a similar limitation? Because that would really be a death strike to like the Ohio State football program, I would think. Are there similar limitations?
It's not, to my knowledge, that's not in either bill now, but I would actually expect it. Because at the end of the day, they're going to try to pick off as much opposition as they can. And that would be an easy way to pick off opposition, at least initially, and to put it through. Even though it's not there now, I could see it. I know that the people running the casinos and so forth probably would like those games in there.
Sure.
But let me ask you this, as a sports gambler, if I've often wondered about this, and I've talked to the casino people, and I'm not really certain of the answer. If you could bet on Ohio State football here, and if you're a gambler in this to make money and not the fan, is Ohio the wrong place to bet the Buckeyes?
Right.
In other words, are the lines going to get moved here so it's not favorable?
Yeah, you are going to be facing a stiffer line. That's probably true. You'll probably be betting against the other team, the team up north, I guess I would say, because the lines are going to be skewed for the home team, no doubt. Rich, I want to thank you for all your time. I guess I always like to ask a little off-the-beat question to close out the interview. You're a numbers guy. You probably see the world a little differently than a lot of us. Do you have one quick story you can share about how you look at numbers and something that you looked at that we maybe wouldn't look at the same way, where you said, I found this interesting because? Is there any quick story you could share with me?
Quick one here, since we're on the sports topic. 2 or 3 years ago when the Cavs were in the playoffs, and I don't know if you've gone to Cavs games, but if we've certainly seen them on TV, the free throw shooter goes up and people have those crazy signs in the background. People are screaming, trying to affect the free throw shooter, right?
Yeah.
Well, there was during the playoffs, the sports editor here, Dave Campbell, wanted me to figure out if that stuff really mattered. So I looked at a few years worth of statistics of free throw shooting in playoffs, trying to hone in on the games that there might be more excitement or more intensity. And what I found incredibly, it didn't matter whether the team was home or away. The free throw shooting was almost down to the hundredth of a point, exactly the same. But what did matter is the home team always got more free throws. And this meant whether you're winning or losing, whether the game was, close or a blowout, the home team was getting more free throws. So my takeaway from that was spend all your energy at the arena yelling at the referees and not about the opposing player.
Right, get the calls.
You'll affect them to get them to go your way.
Yeah, get the calls because the balls are going to go in about the same percentage. That is really interesting. And listeners, please go follow Rich at Rich Exner on Twitter. He has so many interesting tidbits on numbers across the fruited plain, not just sports, but on all topics. Rich, you have been a great interview. Really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining the show.
Thanks for inviting me.
And that was Rich Exner. He is a really interesting read on Cleveland.com, and again, a good follow at Rich Exner. We are going to open up the phone lines. We have a little less time than I had hoped, but if you're listening and want to give us your thoughts on sports wagering or anything we've talked about, the NBA playoffs, and one thing that I neglected to discuss, a friend of mine texted during that interview, the Indy 500 is this weekend. I mean, there's a lot going on in sports, but as sports fans, the storylines aren't there. Back to that topic. If Danica Patrick were racing, if there were a female racer in the Indy 500, that would be a storyline that would probably bring it to our attention. It isn't. There's a bunch of foreigners whose names I cannot pronounce who are going to win that race. That race is going on. The NHL Stanley Cup finals are going on. Indoor professional lacrosse is playing their finals this week. There is a lot in sports, but there just aren't the storylines to draw our attention. Back to sports wagering and some of what Rich said, and you could hear him struggle with the question about game of skill, game of chance, and we were talking off air, Aaron, about that and whether or not it is a game of skill when you're placing a sports bet.
Right. Again, the thing is that when the knowledgeable sports fan is going to place a bet based on what he's learned. He's going to do his homework. He's going to do the footwork. And that's where the skill comes in. You're not just going to place a bet based on, that team has pretty colors, so I'm going to bet on them.
How did you know how my wife bets games?
I was going to say my ex-wife did that with the Colorado Avalanche. Oh my God.
Went well.
Now, there's this game of skill. The game of chance is, as we all know, any given Sunday.
Right.
The team that you thought you did all the math on, and you said, look, I've done the math, I've looked at all the numbers, this is what's going to happen based on my knowledge.
Yeah.
Because one thing could happen, you're betting on a football game, the quarterback blows out his knee in the first quarter, and that's the game.
It's funny, as a lawyer, an attorney, and as someone who's written on constitutional law, it all comes down to how you define these words. And all we can do is look at how the lottery is currently defining game of skill and game of chance. And right now, The real defining factor is whether or not the player has an impact on the game itself. So if you go to a lottery machine and you hit, the pick 3, you press a button, you can actually choose your own numbers there. Mm-hmm. Now, maybe you have some skill in picking numbers. You've researched, that 9, 11, and 22 are hitting 22% of the time, and you've done your research and you're going to pick those numbers. That is similar to choosing against Johnny Manziel because he's terrible at the game of football. It's a similar decision. And then when the game itself happens, the pick 3 or the Rough Riders against the Rough Riders, because every Canadian football team is called the Rough Riders, once that game starts, you have no impact. As a result, I would think it would be a game of skill. I haven't done any detailed research, but to your point, the picking of the numbers or the picking of the game has some skill involved. The actual impact that has on the outcome is probably nil.
Right.
Therefore, I think it would be a game of chance, which would mean the lottery should control it. It's an interesting discussion. We'll see where they come up. Another thing that really interests me about Rich's thoughts on this issue is there's two. One, the betting on in-state teams. I thought it was very interesting when New Jersey's bill came out. The thing that stuck out to me is you cannot bet on any New Jersey college teams. And the reason is obvious. You don't want the public commission, who also has some funding for public schools or colleges in New Jersey, to have that risk of corruption, that risk of impropriety. And as a result, in New Jersey, it probably doesn't matter because Rutgers probably isn't going to be a big bet on anybody's book. Ohio State, that's a whole different story. If Ohio includes that kind of language, and Ohio is the kind of state that would, because we are paranoid about gambling in this state. Rich mentioned it. It took us a decade and a half to get casinos. There are 50 states in the country. I think we were the 51st to get casinos. And while my understanding is there'd be no math on this program, I know that sucks.
Guam had casinos before we did.
Yes, I think they did. And what really bothers me is we lost a lot of revenue, and we've still done it wrong. Quite frankly, we in Ohio, we changed the Constitution to allow 4 cities to have these casinos, and we did it wrong. Competition breeds success. Mm-hmm. This should have been open statewide, so we could have had a casino in Akron, a casino in Youngstown, a casino in Talmadge. If the voters would approve it and you could generate the revenue, it'd be closer to me to place my bets when this becomes legal, which is really the reason here. But quite frankly, that's what capitalism is. And if you've ever been to the Jack Casino, it's not very good. And it doesn't have to be because there's no competition within a couple hours. So they know they don't have to win. They just have to exist. And that's not the way to have good businesses in your state. Finally, I'm also interested in the fact that it's going to be limited in terms of physical locations. But what I find very interesting is online gambling in Ohio is going to change the game. If I can place a bet from my couch through the Jack or through a Racino, and I don't have to actually go to get a ticket, that is going to open up the doors to a lot of opportunities for me, but also it's a big risk because gambling at the end of the day is a very dangerous thing. People can get addicted to it. They can bet money they don't have. It has some really, really negative potential effects. And I think online gambling is something we have to really look at. And are we really opening the door to some real big social issues? I don't know. I think online gambling is a thing. It's going to happen. I know in Vegas, online gambling is actually quite difficult to do. It's easier to just go get a ticket and move on. It sounds like they're going to open it up here in Ohio. I think that's a risk, and we'll see how it turns out. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back with Derek Stevens. Do not miss that interview. He's changing the face of Las Vegas. I am John O'Donnell. This is Cinder Block Sports, and we will be right back.
And now, here is your host, John O'Donnell.
And welcome back to Cinder Block Sports. John O'Donnell here with Aaron Kabak, and we have been covering sports gambling and the legalization of it. We covered Ohio, and now we're going to talk about where it really matters, and that is in Las Vegas. We are going to have Derek Stevens, who is changing the face of Vegas. Had an interview with him. Play that, get some react. Please text the show 234-200-5110, and here is Derek Stevens.
Derek Stevens is literally changing the face of downtown Las Vegas. His newest casino, Circa, will open in late 2020. It will feature the biggest sports book in Las Vegas. He also owns the Golden Gate Casino and Hotel, the D Casino and Hotel, and he is starting a new sports book, Circa Sports, which opens in the Golden Gate on June 1st. We are joined by Derek now. Derek, welcome to Cinder Block Sports. How are you today?
Oh, great to be with you.
Oh, thanks for being here. And even though we're Ohio, we do allow Michigan men in here from time to time. So welcome. Speaking of that, I
appreciate that. We're pretty good with everybody in the Midwest over here at the Date.
That's right. We'll get as many of them as we can, my friend. You started as an engineering major at Michigan. I think you worked in the auto industry a bit, and now you are being talked about in the same sentence as Steve Wynn, Sheldon Alderson, and others as one of the most influential people in Las Vegas. How did that happen? How did you know that Vegas was where you belong, Derek?
Well, I don't know. Maybe that's depends who you talk to, but I don't consider myself at the levels of those guys. But the one thing I can say is we love the casino business. We love getting into the sports business, and overall we just love Las Vegas. So my brother and I get the benefit of having a job all day long, but instead of going home at night, I get to go down to the world famous Long Bar and get to meet all the customers, and we always have a good time.
Well, we certainly do. I've frequented the Long Bar, and for those of you who haven't, it is the longest bar in all of Las Vegas. You have to see it. And really, Derek, what impresses me from a business perspective is how you, pardon the bad pun here, have gone all in on sports gambling in Vegas. A lot of people said as legalized gambling comes up, it's going to hurt Las Vegas. Well, you open a new sports book. You're creating a hotel with sports gambling as a centerpiece, and you are invested in the Vegas Stats and Information Network. What is your vision of sports gambling in Vegas in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I've always thought that sports gambling was going to somehow become legal in one form or the other. I've thought that for a long time, and then now with the Supreme Court overruling PASPA here last year, I think now it's really right before us, and I think the one thing that we're seeing is that the interest in sports gambling has always been there. But it's kind of coming out of the shadows now, and everyone's talking about it more. Obviously, when you have more and more media, television shows, radio shows talking about sports gambling and putting up injury reports on the lines, it just gets everybody a little more interested in it. So I've always been a big sports fan, so I think this is great as a sports fan, because I love seeing the fact that there's so many more people now that want to watch the games.
Absolutely. And the VSiN network is an example of benefiting really from Vegas wagering and out-of-state wagering too. I mean, it's really good information on all sides. What makes the VSiN special, right? How do you see it growing as sports wagering is increasing?
Well, when I first met with Brent Musburger and Brian Musburger, and we kind of talked about it a little bit, and they pitched me on what they were doing. I really liked it. There were some ways you could say, that VSiN really wants to become, what CNBC is to the stock market type of thing, where it provides information to people that are, looking for information on sports. So it's, all the shows are a little bit different. Yep. But I think it provides a lot of information for people that are sports fans and sports gamblers, and with the guests that are on, the shows that are on, it's a product that you just can't find elsewhere. So that's one of the reasons why I really like VSiN, and that's why, we're building, the future home of the VSiN studio inside of our new project, called Circa Las Vegas. We just think it's a big thing, so that's why we're going to build a television studio right inside the casino.
Yeah, and we are talking with Derek Stevens of the Circa Casino, but also of the D Las Vegas and of Golden Gate. Derek, could you just take a quick minute to explain what the sports book at Circa is going to look like? Because it's just so impressive. I'd love if you could describe it to my listeners.
Sure. Well, what I'll do is I'll say, we went in front of the Game Control Board to get our sportsbook license, and a lot of people may not know that if you own a casino, it doesn't mean you can book sports. It's a separate additional license. So we went through that process over the last year, and we got licensed here just recently, and we're going to be opening up our sports brand is called Circus Sports. We'll be opening up our first location of Circus Sports on Saturday, June 1st at the Golden Gate Hotel and Casino. And then a few weeks later, middle of June, we're going to be opening up a Circus Sports location inside the D Las Vegas. So we'll have these two sports books up and going here, real shortly. And it allows our sports team really to build their team and get ready for what's going to happen inside of the new project that we're building called Circa Las Vegas. The sports book there, it's going to be over the top. I mean, it's going to be 3 levels, big, huge theater. It's definitely going to be the greatest sports book in U.S. history. So we're excited. We had a lot of fun designing it, and we can't wait till that opens. And that'll be opening at the end of 2020.
Well, you timed it perfectly. We make one of our trips out there in December every year, so I'm glad that you coincided the opening with us coming out so we can enjoy that next year. We really appreciate that.
No problem. Glad that worked out.
Hey, one of the biggest moves I thought you made as this whole thing started to go down is you brought over Matt Metcalf, who was really well known in Vegas sports gambling. Can you explain why you felt he was the right person to lead not only the casinos, but again, you opened a brand new sports book. What made you know that he was the right pick?
Well, I think sports books do really take the personality on of the leader. And I think, when we had a chance to meet Matt, we hit it off very quickly. I think everything about his background, his resume, his experience level, his modern day math skills and such, it all really came together that when we met with Matt, we knew he was going to be the guy that we were going to bring in to take the lead in our sports business. And it's worked out well. I mean, he's put together, since we first brought Matt on, he's put together a heck of a team. We got 37 people so far working for Circa Sports, and it's been a good start. And we can't wait to start taking some bets here next week.
Next week, it's amazing. We were joined by Derek Stevens again of the D and Circa Vegas and the Golden Gate. Derek, you have been focused on downtown Vegas, and a lot of people, I think, focus on Vegas as the Strip. They may not really understand what downtown Vegas is. What is the difference between the Fremont area and the Strip, and what makes downtown so special to you?
Yeah, well, downtown's special to me because, this is kind of where, when I came to Las Vegas from Detroit back in 2006, this is where I made my first investment, which was at the Golden Gate. And, it was interesting because in 06, 07, 08, the economy kind of crashed. But it was an interesting time in downtown because it brought in a lot of new young investors, and not necessarily in the hotel casino business as much as what happened on Fremont East, and all these young entrepreneurs came in, and what I thought it was just pretty cool to see everybody putting so much capital, but also how much sweat equity they're putting in. So I just really like the environment, and I always thought that downtown Vegas was going to see a resurgence at some point down the road. And obviously what we've seen in the last few years, and what we're going to see in the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to see downtown Las Vegas really continue to grow. Obviously with, there's only 6,000 hotel rooms downtown. And
right.
If you multiply that by 365 days, you're about 2 million hotel room nights. But what's stunning is, downtown Las Vegas is going to do over 22 million visitors. So, that's the second most visited tourist destination in America. And it really goes to show that, downtown Las Vegas is it's a place where everybody wants to come. And whether you stay here or whether you just pop in for a day or a night, it's an awful lot of fun to be had.
Absolutely. I wonder, you're from the Michigan area. I wonder, do you see a comparison between what kind of happened down in Fremont, what's going on down there with Detroit and the resurgence that it's having? Is there a comparison to be made there?
I think there's a very direct comparison. Yeah, I mean, for a guy that kind of grew up in the Detroit area, I'm still a big fan of the Detroit area, and when I go back, get to see all this new revitalization, all this new capital, all these renovated buildings. It's great to see. Detroit's been helped by a couple of different families, the Illich family, and then Dan Gilbert and his crew.
Sure.
It's been terrific for Detroit. So they've really taken the leadership positions, and it's great to see, all these things happening there, with all the residential and new buildings and such. So that's pretty great. And I think downtown Las Vegas has an awful lot of similarities to what's happening in downtown Detroit.
Well, and it's exciting that you're leading the charge, Derek. And I know you're a humble guy. I know there's a lot of people involved, but what you're doing down there is incredible. One of the examples is the D. That's our hotel of choice. We go down 3 or 4 times a year. Why I like it is it's a breath of fresh air. It's just different than the other casinos down there. And I'm curious, can you describe how you came up with your vision for the D? It's the old Fitzgerald's. How did you come up with what the D is, and what's kind of next for the D? As I'm sure you have your evolution in mind for that casino.
Yeah, well, we have the opportunity to kind of cut our teeth in downtown Las Vegas at the Golden Gate. So we tried a lot of things back when nobody was really paying much attention, and one thing led to the next, and we kind of focus in on music, we focus in on sports. We're pretty big about having fun and being real friendly. So our dancing dealers at night are pretty terrific, and once we were able to kind of get through that, when we bought Fitzgerald's, we kind of knew how we wanted to renovate Fitzgerald's, and we wanted to focus in again on having a good time, and having some music, having some good drinks, good cold strong drinks, and let everybody know that we're very respectful about, when someone comes to visit us and, they're going to give us 48 hours of their life, that, it's an honor that they're walking in the door. And I think, those are kind of words that our team really lives by. And we want to make sure we give everybody an experience that they really enjoy. And then when they go back to a hometown USA, they can remember, they had a good time over here at the D.
Well, I want to tell you a quick story, just a couple seconds here. One of my traveling partners, Michigan guy, a Michigan fan. And the reason we ended up at the D the first time was because you make a point to have Michigan football on at the Long Bar. And that was, the beginning of our staying there. So it's a really cool thing you do. And I think you do that with a lot of the Detroit teams, right? You make it a point to have the games available. Is that right?
Yeah, we try to make a point that at Lombard that, whether it's the, Pistons, Red Wings, Tigers, Lions, Wolverines, or Spartans, we'll try to make sure they're on, and, there's so many games these days that, if you have certain teams, you don't always have a chance to watch them in a lot of casinos. So we try to make sure those games are on. But, what's pretty interesting is that, that the D is really, and really a lot of Fremont Street is very Midwestern based. So, I would say we go out of our way to make sure, every Big Ten game is on. We love having Indiana, Northwestern, Minnesota, Ohio State. It's something I would say that's really our core element. Is we really want to try to make sure we take care of our Big Ten area down here.
Well, Derek, I appreciate all your time here. 2 really quick questions. We've been joined by Derek Stevens of the D and Circa Las Vegas and many other endeavors. This is one of my favorite questions to ask you specifically. You've made some pretty famous bets in your days. I mean, I know you had the one at Michigan State for the championship. I'd love to know, and you can just pick one, either your best backdoor cover or maybe your worst beat. Not in terms of dollars, but just kind of as a story, because as a gambler myself, I know the story is really the best part of the bet. So if you wouldn't mind sharing maybe one of your favorite bets one way or another, I'd really enjoy that.
Wow. That's a pretty deep question. I've been betting sports for 30 years here, so there's been a lot of crazy covers. I guess maybe let me think about that. I remember there was a Monday Night Football game where the Baltimore Ravens had a run back on a missed field goal of like 108 yards. Yeah. That was a whopper if you remember that game.
Yeah, and that was a cover for you? You covered on that?
Yeah, I remember I had Baltimore. And it made a difference. To be honest, I don't remember the final score of the game or if I had over in the total, but I know it made a difference.
Yeah.
So, that's what kind of stands out to me.
Absolutely. And again, one last really hard-hitting question, Derek. What would it take to get you to wear an Ohio State shirt during the Ohio State-Michigan game at the end of the year?
I'm a pretty diehard Wolverine guy, but But I've made bets on everything in my life, so that's one I'll never say never to, because if the right opportunity comes, I'll think about it and maybe we'll make a wager.
Said like a good gambler and a great businessman. Never say never. Never know what the opportunity might be, right, Derek?
Yeah.
Hey, again, Derek, thank you for your time so much. Best of luck with everything. Circus Sports is so exciting, and can't wait to see how the casino turns out. Thanks again for your time. You have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Look forward to seeing you down here. We'll have a couple drinks.
Absolutely.
And that was Derek Stevens. As you can tell, that is a guy that has it together. He owns 3 casinos, soon to be 3 casinos. He's opened a new sports book. And I was surprised he didn't just say, I would never wear Ohio State red and gray, but he didn't say that, Aaron. And is he a little less of a Michigan fan because of that?
Maybe not, because I don't make that bet. I made that bet once. I was, I'll tell you how long ago it was. Michigan won.
Oh, jeez.
Okay, I got out of that because I made a bet with a friend of mine who just staunch, just absolute. We went back and forth all year long. And I said, okay, I'm down. I have my Michigan leather jacket that I wore every day. If Michigan wins, you have to wear this. I have to take a picture. I get to take a picture of you. I put it on Facebook and I tag you in it.
Right.
People have to look at it and see that. The other team wins.
Yeah.
I'll reciprocate. And it's the last time that Michigan has managed to beat Ohio State in a football game.
And so you won that.
And I won that, but I have not made that bet since, and I won't because it's too risky.
Well, yeah, I mean, for the last 20 years, that would probably be a bad bet, right? And so I just so you guys know, and I've been to the D in Las Vegas a number of times. When we say the long bar, and you can look this up on the internet, this bar is just absolutely massive. It's the longest in Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. It's, I think, the 4th longest in the U.S., but that always changes because there's always, but he always has Big Ten. Always. I mean, it could be Rutgers, Ohio State. If you are a Big Ten fan, you're a Midwest guy, he's going to have that game. There's something like 24 large 120-inch screens. He's always going to have your game up. So, and it's a great place. And so please go to the D Las Vegas if you get a chance. We were very happy to have him on. One thing I want to react to here. He is building a casino in downtown Las Vegas. And that whole area, most of those casinos were built in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. One was built in the 80s. I think the Grand is actually not on Fremont Street. To absolutely level 3 other casinos, the Las Vegas Club, Mermaids, and Strip Club Central. I forgot the name of it, but there was like 10 strip clubs in that casino. And then to dig a hole 70 feet into the ground, which old casinos, I think the standard was 30 feet, so it's going down 40 more feet, and then build what will be the largest casino. That is an investment that takes balls, absolute balls, because most people who think Las Vegas don't think downtown, they think the Strip. He is taking a huge bet on Circa Las Vegas. I think it's going to pay off. This guy, he seems to have the magic touch, so I'm really excited for him. I've met him in person, talked to him a little bit. Great guy. So if you get a chance to go to Las Vegas, please support the D, Golden Gate, and in a year and a half, Circa Las Vegas. One other point on Las Vegas sports wagering, not to do specifically with Derek. I thought, and most people thought, that when legalized gambling hit the rest of the country, Las Vegas would take a hit. That does not seem to be happening because, as Derek has pointed out in his interview, people are interested in sports gambling completely now. So it almost opens up Las Vegas as a destination city because not only can they gamble at their home state, hey, Las Vegas is someplace I've always wanted to go. I'm a sports gambler now. Let's go. Add to that, the NHL now has a team there in the Golden Knights. The Las Vegas Raiders are embracing gambling through and through. They're going to have signage from Caesar's Palace. They're designing their stadium with some Caesar's Palace references, the pillars. So gambling is infiltrating the NFL. The Las Vegas Golden Knights had a fantastic first year, a decent second year, and we'll see what happens to sports as they get more accepted in Las Vegas. I don't think you'll ever see a baseball team there for one very simple reason. It is fucking hot. It'd be very hard to play Major League Baseball outdoors in Las Vegas. So we'll see what happens. This is Cinder Block Sports. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back. We're going to have my co-host from Bad Friend Choices, Rick Carpenter, talk NBA, NFL, the draft in Cleveland. Very, very cool. We will be right back.
And now, here is your host, John O'Donnell.
Cinder Block Sports. We are covering sports wagering, and we have had Derek Stevens from the D. We have had Rich Exner from Cleveland.com, and we will have Rick Carpenter from Bad Friend Choices join the show. He is on now. Rick, how are you this morning?
Hey, good morning. Good interview.
Hey,
good interview.
Thank you. You know, we all stay at the D. You know how much we like it. Derek's doing great things, man. And as I told him, it's nice that he coordinates that opening in December of next year so we can, christen his new casino with our, crisp $100 bills here in a couple of years.
Yeah, well, you know, that's a birthday vacation spot, so we're definitely going to have to do that.
We always,
especially if that sports book turns out.
Oh my God, 3 stories. If you see some of those renderings, 3 stories and the top story is all radio and TV studios. So, it is amazing. It's about as wide as the Westgate. It's about 20 yards narrower than a Superbook, but it is 3 stories and, it's going to be incredible. So, hey, let me start with this. And I asked Derek because I know you're a Michigan guy. What would it take to get you in an Ohio State jersey for the Michigan-Ohio State game?
Done it all the time. I've probably made that bet 100 times. I always do it jersey for jersey.
Yeah, you do. And I know
you're an Ohio State fan.
I've seen multiple pictures of you in a Steelers jersey. Have you ever had to wear the Ohio State jersey? I can't remember if I've ever seen that.
One time.
Gotcha. I know you stay with me.
I generally won't make the bet. I rare bet money.
Yeah, and you don't bet much on that game in general because it's a nerve-wracking game for you. So I get it. Hey, let's move on to Ohio gambling because I know this is a big deal for you. Rich Exner told us neither of these bills has the ability for the lottery, if they get control, to put gambling in bars. As the owner of the Windsor Pub, this is a big deal for you. Give me your thoughts on that.
I think that Ohio is always backwards. And they don't know what they're doing. They kind of put the cart in front of the horse. They don't really look at things all the way through. The way they're talking about doing it, either way, they're going to give it to casinos. And then maybe if they go the lottery route, they'll give it to the fraternal orders or the lodges because they're clubs.
Right.
Now, you and I both know the word club is kind of just, it's thrown on there now.
Anybody can get in there.
Anything.
Yeah, anybody can get in there. Right.
Anybody can get into any club. So it just, look, government's there to make the rules for us to abide by. They're not there to run our lives and run our businesses, and that's where they need. In all actuality, most people in the government don't know that much about gambling.
No, and it's funny you mentioned that because I think I talked about this with the casinos. I think limiting casinos to 4 cities in Ohio was a bad move because it just cuts down on competition. Here, if you have a good product, give it to the people. Let the people figure out where they want to place their bets. And I talked before, online gambling, I think, is a big risk. Retail gambling, if somebody comes into the bar, can place bets on a game on a Sunday afternoon, they're going to spend more money, they're going to create more revenue, you're going to pay more taxes, it's going to benefit the state, and nobody's looking at that as a revenue generator. They're just trying to keep control of gambling, and I think that's a really bad move, and I think it hurts business owners like you and tens of thousands of other business owners as well.
Well, and here's the thing that Ohio is very irresponsible about. You do not, online gambling is something that all of a sudden that website takes credit cards, it takes debit cards. You don't let people gamble on credit. You know, when I used to play pool all the time, you'd sit there, if you won the pool match, the person, you know, you raced 5 for 5. The person would be like, oh, I don't have it, I'll pay you later. You look at them like, you're playing me on air?
Yeah.
You know, you didn't have the money. You know how many fights I've seen over that?
Oh, yeah.
Well, instead of having the fight now, you're just going to have people losing their houses.
That's
just dumb.
Yep.
You want people to walk up, hand their money over. Look, if you have the money and you hand it over, it's something that you do. If you type in a credit card number, you know, and I know people go broke all the time to find stuff on Amazon and eBay because they don't really think about it. It's just like, it's a push of a button. The money never came out.
No, I agree. And again, I want to move on to the playoffs, but I just think that Ohio's view on gambling is so outdated, and I think it's really going to cost the state, one, in the product. The quality of the product will suffer, and two, I think they're limiting the impact that it can have to, in a positive way, and three, I think they're opening the door, like you just said, to a lot of bad situations because of the online piece. So, I want to move on to the playoffs. You and I have been following this Eastern Conference Finals, the whole series. I think we both said, yeah, it's over at 2-0 Milwaukee. We were wrong. What is going on with Kawhi Leonard at this point?
Well, there's two things. One, he's kind of like that melodramatic kid that you had in school that, any little thing happens, you got to blow it so far out of proportion you think he lost his leg. He's playing great basketball.
Yeah. He is.
I mean, you watch him, he is definitely the best player on the court. If you look at it, he's guarding the best player on the court. I mean, Giannis is unstoppable.
He was.
When he wants to be.
He was. But the problem with Giannis, right, is he has to play in an 8-foot box. He made that 1-3, which I thought was a huge shot for him. But Kawhi can score anywhere on the court. Giannis basically has to be in a lane, and I think that's a huge difference in this series.
Yeah, I think Giannis' problem is just youth. And Kawhi's been here before. Giannis is forcing the issue. He's not letting the game come to him. He's kind of like trying to play like LeBron does, where he plays some more ISO. Get off the ball, run off some screens, get it open, get easy scores, move the ball. That's what I like about watching Kawhi. Kawhi is constantly moving the ball. He's not sitting there and playing ISO ball.
Yeah. And you
can't argue that Kawhi is right now best player.
No, I think so. And I was comparing him earlier to Michael Jordan here in terms of taking over a game on the defensive end, on the offensive end, putting the dagger in these people. And to that point, Giannis Antetokounmpo was 4 of 9 from the free throw line. And I know he's a big guy. Big guys struggle from the line, but he's a 74% career free throw shooter. And in the playoffs, he's around 60%. Is that just nerves? Is he just choking? Or is that youth? What is that? That seems crazy.
I'm hoping that's youth because you see this kid's skill level and his talent. Look, if I told you in the offseason that he was going to sit there for a month, train with Akeem Olajuwon, and then we're going to work on his ball handling skills, and he's going to trade with Isaiah Thomas for a month after that, you'd be sitting there going, next year I'll be pretty interesting.
Yeah, much like
he's just got everything.
Okay, so let's talk that out a minute. So Ben Simmons works with Reggie Miller and develops a jump shot. Is that the same type of thing?
Ben Simmons could work with God and isn't going to have the confidence to take the shot. He just won't do it. You got to remember, the difference between Giannis and Ben Simmons, truthfully, is Giannis is at least attempting it and trying to move his game forward. Ben Simmons won't even attempt a jump shot. That's why they've almost gotten rid of him in Philly. They're talking about trading him. Granted, they're talking about trading him for LeBron, but he's got to get that jump shot. He's got to show the work ethic that everybody else shows to get better.
I agree. I think the fact that Ben Simmons does not seem to want to shoot is a real problem. I don't know if it's a total confidence issue or the fact that he's got a lot of mouths to feed. Joel Embiid is on that team. Jimmy Butler's on that team. I think if Ben Simmons were more in a starring role where he was forced to score, like Giannis is forced to score, it could be a little different in terms of him attempting shots. But the point's the same. He's got to learn how to shoot the basketball. Giannis has to learn to be a consistent shooter and good free throw shooter because he just looks human. And I'm not saying, you know how much I like Giannis. He looks human and Kawhi Leonard looks like Michael Jordan-ish. I mean, it's amazing the comparison of these two right now.
Hey, LeBron only shot 68% from free throw line this year, so
he had a rough year. He did. He had a rough year.
His free throw shooting's never been good.
No, but it was
tell you why that's terrible.
But it was better than that. It was 72-73 to drop this much, and I don't know. There's no explanation.
When did 72 and 73% become acceptable? When we were growing up,
yes.
If you were an 84% free throw shooter, you were bad.
And think about when they talk about Kawhi and they're saying he's such a great free throw shooter, and he is. He's like 90%. But Mark Price, I think, wasn't he like 98% that one year? And Reggie Miller used to be 96%, and now we're saying like 85 to 88 is like amazing. I would ask that same question. I don't know why it's so bad now.
Why does the quality of the game have to go down and people not realize it and be like, oh, well, this guy's shooting good. You're shooting 78%. That's not shooting good.
Right. No.
I mean, it's just, let's be honest. Let's point out some of the factors of what they're doing in today's game. They're not taking quality shots. You know, how many times did I text you on Thursday night saying, Why are they taking fadeaway threes with 18 seconds left to go on the shot clock?
Yeah.
You want to know why they're losing? That's why.
Well,
I mean,
does it go down to this? Because we've talked about this before. Coaching in the NBA used to matter. The Lenny Wilkins of the world, the John Daly's of the Chuck Daly's of the world, John Daly golfs, Chuck Daly's of the world, Phil Jackson. These guys actually coached up their teams. You know, take Toronto. Toronto fired the coach of the year, and now Nick Nurse, who I couldn't pick out of a lineup if you paid me $1 million, he is going to lead this team to the NBA Finals. I think coaching is so unimportant compared to what it used to be, and as a result, the game's quality is decreasing. Is that a fair argument?
well, let's be honest with the whole thing. I mean, over the past 15 years, the players have slowly, I mean, they've always had control of this league, but they have put their foot on the throats of these owners. They run the league. There's no doubt about it. And if you're not going to listen to your coach, or if your coach is sitting there going, if I do anything, I'm going to get fired, which happens because if the superstar doesn't like you, you're gone. And that's been going on forever. Magic got a coach fired and, you know, whatever. But sooner or later, to get better at a game, you have to listen to people. It's like to get better at business. You always sit there and you listen to talk to people. You gotta have your ears open and your mouth shut, and that's how you learn.
Yep. 2 ears, 1 mouth. Use one twice as much. You're absolutely right, and I think you nailed it there. It's the desire to want to learn and get coached and get better, and athletes at all levels in all sports seem to be opposed to that. It seems to be, I know what's best for me. I don't have to listen to the coach. And a lot of that has to do with player control. A lot of that has to do with the amount of money that they're being paid. I mean, they got paid a lot in the 80s and 90s as well, but these dollars that these guys, yeah, exactly. I want to move on kind of quick here, because this is something I know you follow a lot. You're a Michigan guy. Juwan Howard has been named the head coach of Michigan college basketball team. What are your thoughts on that hire?
Odd. Juwan Howard's part of the Fab Five, which is, you know, everybody remembers the timeout and everything, but, you know, there was a lot of ridicule and everything that followed that team around for years after they left. I just didn't think they'd bring any of them back.
Right.
Because, you know, all the dirt and everything's going to end up coming back out, and I don't think they want to live through that again.
Well, what's interesting about this is Juwan Howard, by all accounts, was the leader of that group. He's the one that recruited Chris Webber and Jimmy King and Jalen Rose to Michigan. He was the first one to sign with Michigan, Juwan Howard was. But
yeah, him and then Jalen Rose.
Right, but
got everybody then too.
2 Final Fours that have been taken down from the rafters because of recruiting issues, and to bring him in this day and age with no coaching experience, no experience in the AAU or college level, that seems like a risk for both guys. It seems like a risk for Michigan, and it seems like a risk for Juwan Howard, who was going to get an NBA job. He was. I just don't understand why he left.
Yeah, he's been an assistant coach for a while, though.
Yes.
I don't know who's he.
Miami. He was at Miami for a long time, but LeBron loves the guy. LeBron's going to get him hooked up, and maybe not in LA, but LeBron's got influence in this league. He's good. He got interviewed in Cleveland. He got interviewed in LA. He was going to get an NBA job. And he's getting $2 million a year with a $7 million buyout. It's a good move for him financially, but I think it's a long road to success for him because the program's so high already, Rick. I mean, the team was just in the finals 2 years ago. I don't understand.
Well, that's the problem. I mean, you're replacing a great coach.
Exactly.
You better produce, because this guy, I know he said he was done because he didn't like recruiting against the one and dones.
Right.
Guess what, Juwan Howard? He recruited great against the one and dones, and you know what you got to do now? It's not going to be easy.
No, and look at the look.
You're going to have to sit there and go ahead.
No, I was going to say, look at like Patrick Ewing. He's at Georgetown, and they're doing okay. But getting dusting off these greats. Chris Mullen, he did terrible at St. John's. Patrick Ewing, he's not doing great at Georgetown. Now, what's interesting is Penny Hardaway. Penny Hardaway's coaching at Memphis, right? I mean, Memphis is not a great, huge program, but because he was in AAU for so long, a coach in that program, they have the #1 recruiting class. That's what it takes. Juwan Howard doesn't have those connections. Maybe he gets assistants that have those connections, but that's a real big problem in the one and done era.
Oh, I love Penny Hardaway. Yeah, you want to talk about a talent that just we didn't get to see his full potential. Man, that guy could play.
Him or Grant Hill? Who could have been greater? Him or Grant Hill?
Honestly, I'm going to have to go with a couple of NBA guys that I know. I love Grant Hill too, but Penny Hardaway was probably LeBron before LeBron was LeBron.
I think you're right, and we never got to see it. No, I think you're right.
Athletic ability was nuts. I remember watching him when he was playing in college. He just took a lob. I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
I knew he could pass, I knew he could dribble. I didn't know he could jump like that. It looked like he had jetpacks on. So
yeah.
I love the guy.
And he could score. He wasn't a great shooter, but back then that wasn't the thing. He was a slasher and a scorer, and he had great vision, and you're right, we never got to see it. Grant Hill, we at least got to see, because he hung on for so long, we got to see glimpses of what he could have been. Penny Hardaway, I just don't think we ever saw, what a mature NBA player he could have been because of the injuries. So I probably would agree with you.
No, and he even talked about it. He came back from injury one time, and he said this guy blew by him, and he goes, I retired. He goes, that guy can't play with me. He shouldn't be on the same court with me. And here he is. He's making me look like a fool. I was done.
Exactly. Hey, we have about 5 minutes left. I want to talk about the NFL draft coming to Cleveland. An announcement came out this week, 2021. How big a deal is that going to be for Cleveland, especially given where the Browns are and could be in 2 years?
Well, it's kind of weird because we got to know where they're going to put it, right? I mean, it's in downtown Cleveland, and on that day, it could be snowing. It could be raining.
Yeah.
It's not going to be Nashville 80 degrees and nice out.
Right. Now, Nashville, it did rain during the first day of the draft, but the weather was much different. You're right. It could actually be snowing now that you mentioned that. That's a really good point. I have to think they're going to put it in, Tower City, the square there. I have to think it's what they're going to put. I don't think they'll have it at the stadium. I think they're going to have it there at the square, and that's going to shut down the entire city. The entire city. I mean,
What about the IX Center?
It's going to be outside. They do them outside. They don't do them inside anymore.
Well, yeah, but they've only been doing it for a couple of years, so, I mean, they can always modify what they're doing. It's the NFL. Anything they can do to get more money. But they said this is worth like $100 million to Cleveland. Well,
so it's interesting. Nashville blew everybody away. Nashville had 600,000 people estimated in 3 days down there. And they said $133 million in direct spending, which was $224 million in overall economic impact. Those numbers are massive, because compare that to Dallas. Dallas was $74 million direct, 125 overall. And I think you mentioned that they think Cleveland's going to be about 100. I think that's fair. I don't think they're going to do Nashville numbers. Nashville is just a mecca of entertainment. I don't think Cleveland's going to do those numbers.
Well, I mean, you got to look at what Cleveland could do with it. If Cleveland is coming off a really big winning season, they'll promote the Browns right through it. And as long as the Browns keep doing better and better, Cleveland could top those numbers just because people will show up, people will be interested in draft. But not just that. People have been following the Browns forever when we've been following, really bad football for a long time. Now that we possibly have a winner on our hands, they're going to come out of the woodwork again.
Maybe. I mean, again, though, you make the point, and I think Philly suffered from this, too, when they had the draft. The weather's going to be a factor. I mean, I think if they get the Dallas numbers, that would be a big deal. And you're absolutely right, Rick. Cleveland could be NFL's crown jewel. They could by then. I mean, if Cleveland gets a big run, if Baker's a top 3 quarterback, if there's no off-the-field issues, you've got the draft. And this is 5 years at that point away from an 0-16 season? They could be the number one team in the NFL based on all those factors. Now, that's a lot to cover. I mean, they may not get all those things come into play, but the fact that opportunity is there for Cleveland, that is absolutely huge.
Hey, did Cleveland sign Gerald McCoy yet?
I don't know. There's been no announcement. He is now visiting, I just read he's going to Philly for a visit now, this weekend. So he left Cleveland without a contract, and I said you had to get him under contract before he left. And I mean,
he's going to see, his agent wants to see what he can get.
Of course.
I think he'll be here, but
you don't need him.
Like $11 million.
You don't need him. I mean, you got the cap space as long as it's a 1-year contract. That's what I'll say. I don't want to see them commit any more money after this year because there's a lot of signees coming up in the next 2 years. You and I have talked about that. You're going to have to, maybe they don't sign Chubb because he's a running back, but you've got to give money but you got to save money for Baker. You got to save money for a lot of these young defensive linemen. If they do 1-year deal, like the Nagama and Sue deal, I'd be happy. But if they do a 2 or 3 year deal, that's a bad move for Cleveland, I think.
Well, 2, I wouldn't mind. Just make most of the money this year.
Exactly. Front load it. Absolutely. Got 2 minutes left with you, Rick. I want to ask you about Kevin Durant. it looks like leaving. He is getting real frustrated with not being able to play. You and I have talked about that injury. I still think it's an Achilles. I don't think we're going to see him this year. What happens to him after this year?
Okay, right. So he's the worst thing to happen to the NBA forever because here's the thing. He has a player option for next year.
Right.
And if he doesn't play in the finals, you're not getting a max deal from people. People
Right.
are going to be worried that it's your Achilles.
Right.
Then you got to go and prove it's not your Achilles, but you got to fight through it, and they're going to notice something wrong, right? So
You opt in.
actually end up staying with Golden State for one more year.
Right.
Because he's going to be afraid.
And a meaningless
Golden State
season.
doesn't want him to stay.
Right.
Golden State's at the point where they're like, look, dude, you can go. We honestly do not need you to win. I mean, you watch them play. They play better ball when he's out. Because when he's in, a lot of times they sit there and they start referring back and playing ISO ball again. But, I mean, I'd love to see him leave. Please let him leave because the one thing I see is him. If he stays, Kyrie's definitely going to L.A.
Right.
Because he's not going to go to New York by himself because Kyrie's not
that guy.
Strong enough or anything. Yeah. And then he goes to L.A., and then I have a real problem because LeBron and Kyrie were just teammates 2 years ago in Cleveland.
Yeah.
And you guys couldn't work it out. Now you're in L.A. and everything's sunny, shiny, and happy. Get out. That's not what sports is about. You guys are just acting like spoiled 2-year-olds, taking your ball and going home.
No, you've been consistent on that, and I've started to warm up to what you're saying there, that the Kyrie-LeBron situation seems shady, given that they were bitter enemies and now maybe teammates again. It's
that's going to be wrong. The NBA needs to step in and figure out how to get control of the league again, because they're going to lose a bunch of teams. We talked about this, that lottery. I mean, how much did that just save two teams?
Yep.
One team in New Orleans was going to lose one of the best players in the NBA. The other team, Memphis, has Mike Conley, who's probably the most overpaid point guard in NBA history. They had Marc Gasol, but you don't ever see those players.
No.
You don't ever hear about those players because of the cities they're in.
I agree.
Now they're going to have Ja Morant and Zion.
I agree. I think there's a tinfoil hat theory there, Rick. We are out of time on the segment. We never have enough time. Thanks for calling in. We'll get you next week, man. Have a great day.
Okay, you too, bud.
See you, brother.
Bye.
That was Rick Carpenter. We are Cinder Block Sports, and we will be right back.
And now, here is your host, John O'Donnell.
And welcome back to Cinder Block Sports. We are here at the Deb McCune Broadcast Center, and we're here for our last segment. We always close out the show. Quick 10-minute segment. We're going to open up the phone lines. If you were listening, want to give us a call with your thoughts on the show at 234-200-5110. Because we were a packed show, I'm not going to have time to talk about game fixing and the risk of it. Plus, I have a tease that we have Brian Tahoe, who wrote a book about 6 years ago. The Fix is in. He's wrote a sequel. The Fix is still in. He has some great thoughts on the conspiracy of game fixing in all major sports. Now, I, like Aaron, think that boxing and combat sports is more ripe for game fixing because those athletes really have direct impact on whether or not the fight continues, and there's so much room for corruption there. But Brian, the author of The Fix is Still In, would tell you that even in the major sports, there's huge risks there. So we'll get more into that topic on another show. I do think with the legalization of gambling, you have to look at that. You just have to look at that, especially in the NCAA. The NCAA is corrupt as all get out already, and the athletes do not get paid. As a result, I think there's a lot of potential for game fixing because the athletes are not getting paid. People will prey on them, and it may actually lead to some changes, as we've heard rumblings that athletes may get some money, may get some rights to their likenesses. At any rate, we'll address that on another show. I do want to thank Rick Carpenter. We had to jump off the phone quick for joining the show. We've also had Derek Stevens and Rich Exner on. And one thing I want to talk about before the close is the Preakness. Again, this is one of those things that happened in sports last week, but nobody was really paying attention. And the reason is the winner of the Kentucky Derby, Country House, wasn't running. This is something that's bothered me in recent horse racing about the Kentucky Derby. the winner of the Derby, if they are not one of the favorites, if they're not one of the strongest horses in the field, and by field I mean 3-year-olds. So the Kentucky Derby and the Triple Crown in general is for 3-year-olds. If it's not one of the top 3-year-olds, then they quit. They don't race in the Preakness. They don't race in the Belmont because they want stud fees. If you win the Derby, as a Derby winner, you're going to be able to command stud fees. Listen, us as guys, we'd all love to command stud fees. Not going to happen, but horses can. I will say this, though. Country House won because of a disqualification, right? So a lot of people who watched that race said Country House shouldn't have even won the darn thing. A lot of people thought that it should have been War of Will because, again, the winner of the Derby gets disqualified, and all of a sudden the upstairs replay judges choose who wins the race. Country House got that win. So even though he's a Derby winner, I don't think horse racing experts are going to sit there and go, oh yeah, he's a Derby winner, let's pay $1 million. I think they're going to say, this horse got lucky. So I think it should be a requirement. I think if you win the Derby and there's no injuries, verifiable by objective doctors, get your horse out there and race him in the next race. That develops storylines. Horse racing is a sport that needs storylines. They didn't have one going in. What they did have is a really good field. One of the things that interests me the most was Bod Express. Bod Express at the Derby was 74-1. My wife, the betting expert, loved Bod Express because of the name and bet $5 to win, place, or show. That means it was a $15 ticket on a horse that 74 times, if the race was won, would win it once. Well, it did not win. It did not place. It did not show, and I lost $15. Notice I lost $15 on my wife's bet. Another discussion for another day. Now, going into the Preakness, he was 17-1. So he showed some flash in the Derby, and 17-1, hey, that's actually a live underdog, right? Another good story going in, Improbable and War of Will. These were two horses that a lot of people thought should have been awarded the Derby after Maximum Security was disqualified. They weren't, but they were two favorites. And a new horse in the field, Owendale, also real strong horse. So I thought it was a really good field for the Preakness. I like horse racing. With all those storylines that I follow as a horse racing fan, I was looking forward to the race. And for the second straight race, the winning horse, in this case, War of Will, was not the story. Bod Express was the story. Why? Well, because while Bod Express was running the race, his jockey was on the ground at the starting gate. The starter for Bod Express held on to the bit a little too long. As a result, when the gate opened, the jockey, who weighs approximately the same as a lima bean, was thrown from the horse onto the ground, and the horse started running the race by itself. Now, I want you to know that had that horse won the race, it would not have won the race. There actually is a rule that says a horse must have a jockey on its back to win a horse race. I didn't know that. The horse didn't know that because it was in it to win it, man. It ran around like crazy. And they send these other horses out to chase this horse. The racing horse. You're chasing a racing horse. You're going to lose. And so around the track they go. It was an absolute spectacle. I've never seen anything like it. It also was very dangerous. You have a 1,200-pound horse running, thank God, around the track on the outside. Had that horse cut to the inside, we could have had absolute disaster. So luckily, it turns into one of the funniest things I've ever seen on the racetrack and not one of the most damaging and horrible things. I guess that's a fine line in life, though, right? Insanity and genius, fun and danger, they kind of run pretty close to one another. So that was the biggest story of the race, just like the disqualification of Maximum Security was the biggest story. So 2 Triple Crown races, and the winner doesn't really matter in either race. Except War of Will, that's a good horse. It's a good horse. It probably should have won the Derby. It wins the Preakness, and it runs a really good race. I'm not going to get into the technical details of it, but it was just a great run by War of Will. Looking forward to seeing that horse in the Belmont and then in other races as well. As a 3-year-old, I think it's the best 3-year-old in horse racing right now. But again, not really the story, as we had a headless horse or a jockeyless horse running around the track. Headless horse, I guess, would have been funnier now that I think about it. But at any rate, before we close out the show, I have a real exciting announcement to make about next week's show. Next week's show will be themed Cleveland Rocks. We are going to be talking Cleveland sports. The Indians, the Browns, the Cavs. We're going to talk about a soccer tournament coming to Cleveland. And we are going to have live on the show in the 10 o'clock hour, Mary Kay Cabot. Mary Kay Cabot is a nationally renowned and awarded beat writer for the Cleveland Plain Dealer. She will be live on the show. She has written some great articles about the Browns and the expectations that they have coming into the season. So we're really excited about that show, and we hope you will listen. As we close out this week, I want to mention a couple things. One, when you talk about storylines in sports driving attendance, driving interest, you have to keep in mind that a lot of us are passionate about certain sports. Aaron, huge soccer fan. Myself.
Football.
No, you like soccer.
Football.
Oh, with a U. I don't understand why there has to be two sports.
Okay. I'm gonna try to wrap this as quickly as I can.
Take your time.
It is the original game of football.
Correct.
In this game of football, you use your feet.
Correct.
You use them 90% of the time.
Correct.
In what I dub as American rugby, which what we call football, you use your feet maybe 5% of the time.
Correct.
Case closed.
I don't understand why American football is called football, but it is. It's the most popular sport in the United States, and we're the United States, so we win. That's the best logical argument I got.
Merca.
I want to thank everybody for listening. Please follow the show on Twitter at Cinder Sports. Follow me at HitTrain1. Guys, we love the show. We can't look forward to do it next week. Have a great weekend. This is John O'Donnell, Aaron K. back with Cinder Block Sports. Take care.